All right. I think we are live. So thank you everybody for coming. I'm really excited for our topic today about, what and why the world, what in the world and why it leads us to feel unhappy sometimes. And we're going to be talking about that here in Innerworld. I really appreciate everyone being here. And first, I want to start out by saying that not everyone is unhappy. I know the title of the event is like, Why Does the World Make Us So Unhappy? Not everybody's unhappy, but there does seem to be a kind of sentiment that's also backed by, rising rates of depression and anxiety and things like that, that perhaps there are things happening in the world that are related to people feeling unhappy, anxious, like a lot of negative emotions happening. And many of the things that relate to like politics, religion, things like that can be divisive. But interestingly, and this is something about Innerworld that's really cool, the negative emotions themselves that we experience related to these things, including sadness and unhappiness, as well as our thoughts and behaviors, they're often the same. Even when people are on two completely different sides of an issue in terms of politics or religion, oftentimes emotions, behaviors, thoughts can be very similar. And so I'm really excited to be hosting this event because there's very few places in the world. In fact, I think that Innerworld is actually one of the only ones where we can come together and, talk about this from completely different backgrounds. We have folks with different political backgrounds, different geographical backgrounds, religious backgrounds, but we're able to come together, connect, and realize that we are all struggling with similar emotions. And that the tools that we have in Innerworld, the tools of cognitive behavioral immersion, can be helpful to us regardless of our differences. So today we're going to dive into why we sometimes feel unhappy about today's world and also what we can do to feel better. So for the agenda, basically first we're going to understand how we experience unhappiness and other emotions, and then we'll explore sources of things in the world that lead us to feel unhappy or other negative emotions. And then we'll identify coping strategies and wrap up with takeaways as well. And I do want to remind everyone that we do have a set of guidelines in Innerworld about, that are designed to help promote the safety of our community and the safe space and healing. So I want to highlight the importance of not getting into the specifics of politics or religion, but instead talking about it broadly in terms of our emotional experiences. When we ask what's leading you to feel unhappy in the world, we want to make sure that we're not like specifying groups of people, things like that, but kind of being very general because it's really about our own thoughts and feelings and behaviors, as we'll see, rather than the specific thing that's leading you to feel unhappy that's, happening in the world. And so to start off, first we're going to do an exercise to practice this. And I actually am curious for everyone to think of something happening in the world that when you think about it leads you to actually feel happy instead of unhappy. So it can be an event, a beautiful monument, a favorite restaurant, a trip, your job, something like that. So if you want to use the text prop, so if you open your quick menus, there's in Innerworld, we have this text prop that you can spawn text and kind of move it around in this three-dimensional way. It's a really cool way for everyone to share kind of all at once. And we'll just make a little collage of all the different things that, just anything. It can be a partner, it can be your children, something in the world that leads you to feel happy. And just type it out in the text prop, and then we'll kind of compile them behind me here. So I can grab for people who aren't in VR, we could just kind of, if you see one, you can kind of grab it, and we'll just make a little wall of things that make people happy. Great. I see my cats. I see music availability. Family. Public service with ham radio. Disneyland. Nice. I've never been to Disneyland before.
I'm in Disney World.
About it make you feel good
Yes.
though?
Say it again.
Doesn't thinking about it make you feel good though?
Yes. Grandkids. So I'm seeing a
They
lot
should
of
make an
family here.
Innerworld ride at Disneyland.
Yes, we totally should do that. Relaxing under my favorite tree in my picnic chair with snacks. I love it. My cat. I'm seeing a lot of cats. I have 3 cats, so I'm very pro cat, cat and friends. Nice. Bird watching. Like it. So we're seeing lots of different things that lead people to feel happy. I see another one over here watching the Olympics. Nice. And the reason I wanted to do this is because, when we think about how we're feeling in the world, sometimes it's easy to come away and say, I am so stressed, or I am so unhappy, or the world is making me so unhappy, or all these kind of negative things. And it's really important, that can be a cognitive distortion where we're kind of maximizing and focusing only on the things that are leading us to be unhappy, which we will talk about because there are serious things happening that lead people to feel real negative emotions. And at the same time, we also want to be thinking about things that lead us to feel happy because it's not all or nothing. Emotions are dynamic and we feel them at different times based on different things that we're exposed to. And some things we have control over and some things we don't. And interestingly, almost all of these things are things that people have control over, their behaviors or having kids, participating in an online community, going to Disneyland, relaxing, under your favorite tree with your picnic chair and snacks, being employed, listening to music. These are all behaviors that people engage in, that you're able to choose to engage in to feel happy. And a key thing about what's happening in the world is that we don't always have control over what's happening in the world. And so that's something that we're going to be talking about because that's a really important component here. Any other thoughts from folks, in terms of any similarities or themes that you're seeing in terms of these different things that lead people to feel happy? Anyone has any thoughts on that you're noticing? Or any kind of reactions to seeing these different things? Yeah, happy, smile more. An
Well,
appropriate
most of the
username for this topic.
people I've listed, and I put music availability are like they're accessible. So a lot of things are. I mean, it gets hard when resources that people need aren't available.
Yeah, that's a good point. A lot of these things require resources to do as well, whether financial or environmental. Having the right environment as well. Great. Any other thoughts before we go to the next section? Yeah, Sadie Mae, were you gonna say something? Okay, so I'm going to clear the props now, just so that our performance stays pretty good. And so, how do we experience emotions? When we think about the world and things that are making us unhappy or leading us to feel unhappy, some of you might have seen this model, the Cognitive Behavioral Immersion model, but I'm just going to quickly kind of describe it as well. And Leon, I'm not sure for the folks on YouTube if you want to get a little closer to this as well to be able to see it. But, the idea, and anyone here as well, the idea is that we have the white circles our environment, which is where we are. So right now, a lot of us are in this virtual environment, in this relaxing, island right now. And within our environment, wherever we are, we have certain thoughts, feelings, behaviors, and physiology that are all connected to one another. And we don't actually decide whether we're going to feel unhappy or lots of emotions, sad, anxious, guilty, excited, motivated. We can't just decide to feel a certain way because our feelings are kind of automatic and they're occurring in real time with us, within us. But because our feelings are connected to what we're thinking, our thoughts, what we're doing, our behaviors, our physiology, what's happening in our body, whether it's like exercise, meditation, taking, medication, all of those things, our thoughts, behaviors, and physiology and our environment, those are all things that affect our feelings and how we feel, including unhappiness. And so when we talk about the world leading us to feel unhappy, the first thing I want to say is that, you know, something can't make us feel unhappy because in order to feel unhappy, there have to be thoughts that are going through your head or experiences, behaviors that you're engaging in, physiological reactions that are happening. And so something can't necessarily make us feel unhappy, but instead it's a stimulus that can lead us to have certain thoughts and reactions that then, trigger that feeling of unhappiness. And oftentimes with things in the world that lead people to feel unhappy, whether it's, elections or politics, religion, a job, things like that, it's how we think about those situations or what we're able to do or not do about those situations that often lead to the feeling of unhappiness. And so our thoughts can drive unhappiness, our behaviors can affect it as well. And the only way that we can actually affect our environment, which is the world around us, is through our behaviors. So we can, you can examine your thoughts to help yourself feel better. We can increase or decrease our heart rate, things like that. But the only way that we can affect the world around us is through our behaviors. And that's a really important theme for, thinking about the things in the world that lead us to feel unhappy, because a big question is, what can you do about it? And if you can't do anything about it, is there a way that you can look at your thoughts related to the situation to potentially like reframe the thoughts or examine whether there's any cognitive distortion? Or in some situations, we also have to think about practicing mindfulness and acceptance, understanding that we can't change something, and then thinking, okay, I can't change this thing that's going on, but what can I do? Can I engage? What behaviors can I engage in? Like those examples that we had that can help me feel happy. And, so it's really important to think about the external factors that, in our environment that affect our emotions. So now that I've explained this, does anyone have any questions before we move into kind of the sources of what leads people to feel unhappy? Any questions about this, of the model or anything? Kind of makes sense to folks? Seeing some nods and thumbs up. Okay, great. So now I want us to think about the things that lead us to feel unhappy in the world. And we're going to use the text prop again and do this, but I really want people to keep it broad. So we don't want to get into like politics and religion, but you can keep it, try to keep it as broad as possible. And if something is too specific, we can, I'll give some feedback and we can like rewrite it or something. But I want folks to use the text prop and think about something in their life that's in the world that's leading you to feel unhappy. Yeah, Mystic.
Well, I've been working with a lot of people lately with like coaching, and the first thing I do when it comes to that particular subject is start talking about, like, I call these things triggers that we have, and we develop these triggers, or buttons as I like to put them metaphorically, and we get more and more buttons as we get older, and then I sit them down and try to help them understand what triggers their buttons. And like they would say, like somebody cutting me off, or somebody yelling, or somebody not listening to me. And so that's how I developed that part of it.
Yeah, I think that's a great example of triggers as well happening. And I think we'll see some of those examples here. I really appreciate that insight. And also, if anyone has thoughts throughout this process or questions or anything, you can definitely raise your hand and ask. I really appreciate your sharing that, Mystic, as folks are, typing sources of things that lead them to feel unhappy in the world. I'm seeing financial instability. I'm seeing war as well. Let's see. Yeah, as folks kind of create these props, poverty, lack of access to healthcare and medicine. Just going to move this model back a little bit so we have some more room. Feeling unsafe due to political unrest. Yes, comparing myself to people's social media highlight reels as well. A lot of that kind of comparison that can happen. I see poverty. Rude people.
Amen.
Yeah. Yes. Negativity. I see work. I see not being heard or listened to. Increased hyper-focusing on themselves. See a few more coming up here. Yeah, judging people. And we have costly healthcare. So it's interesting. There's a lot here, and I'm seeing some themes in terms of things that lead us to feel unhappy in the world. It kind of seems like we can break these out into, there seems to be like personal relationships, rude people, kind of increased hyper focusing on themselves, things like that, judging people. I see, things about societal issues and things that are happening, such as war, poverty, lack of access to healthcare, medicine, which is also economic. I'm seeing a lot about finances here in terms of poverty and financial stress that people are having that leads people to be unhappy. So I'm curious if anyone kind of wants to share a little bit of, their an example that they put up here, and we can kind of look at some of the thoughts and feelings and see if there's any kind of overlap in terms of these different kinds of topics. Would anyone feel comfortable sharing what they chose to put out? Yeah, insomnia doodles.
Sure. Yeah, I chose financial instability because I get very frustrated when I think about the fact that a lot of folks just can't afford basic necessities. Things that could be really easy for some folks to have access to, like fresh vegetables, for instance. There are so many families that just can't afford to have access to fresh, healthy food, and not just that, but other things too, like luxuries as well. Not being able to go on vacation, stuff like that. And there are some people that can and they can't. Just the only difference is how much money you have, and that's very frustrating to me.
Yeah, and I'm hearing it's interesting. I'm hearing frustration. I can kind of write down some of the emotions that people share, and it's interesting because frustration and unhappiness are related to one another. Where you're feeling unhappy and reflecting on the fact that you're frustrated. Anyone else want to share what they put out? Yeah, happy.
I wrote poverty and lack of access to healthcare and medicine. I guess I started off positive, which is I think Innerworld's helpful because it creates that accessibility for people to talk to. I mean, especially in mental health, like, therapists are available during the day, and a lot of people need help at all hours, and Innerworld, makes that possible. So I think, just increasing that accessibility to resources that people need is, I think, a really important theme that the group seems to be discussing. And absolutely, like people need healthy food, first of all.
Yeah, it's really interesting that there's, it seems like a lot of folks are feeling unhappy about the fact that other people are experiencing stresses in the world and awareness of that. And I see some folks as well, their own situations, but it's interesting because that is something that's harder to control as well. That might be out of our control. We'll talk about that in a second. Gentle Star. Increased hyper focusing on themselves.
Increased hyper focusing on themselves. If everyone has their opinion of themselves, and that's fine. But it seems that if you don't accept their opinion, you're wrong for having your own opinion. That while you may accept them, they don't accept you. It seems very, one-sided. So, and it bothers me that people can't accept others, even though others are trying to accept them.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's an interesting observation. And I think, one thing that happens as well in terms of like, if we think about the divisiveness of, things like politics or views on different things, there seems to be like a need. There's something called cognitive dissonance, and there's like this triad where we want people who we love and like to like and love the same things that we do. And when that doesn't happen, we experience something called cognitive dissonance, which is that like, okay, I love this person and I strongly disagree with like a view that they hold. And I've noticed it in my own family as well, that there's this desire to talk about these things and kind of like work it out as if there's going to be like a solution towards the disagreements about these different topics. And again, that's kind of what we're going to talk about in a second in terms of we have a tool, the hula hoop tool, in terms of what's in our control and what's outside of our control. And sometimes setting boundaries is something that's really helpful in those kinds of situations because, maybe people can relate to each other and accept that there are differences and not need to convince each other of those differences. And it's different for every person. It depends on the individual, it depends on the views, it depends on the relationship between the two people. There's lots of factors, but boundary setting, again, is a behavior because the theme of today, in case folks are, maybe some folks are starting to catch on a little bit, is that we can't control the things outside, that are happening necessarily. We can't stop something from happening. We can't change someone's view necessarily. The only thing we can do is choose what behaviors we're going to engage in to affect our environment and the world around us. So we can choose whether we're going to engage with someone who disagrees with us, or we can choose, what we're going to do, seeing that if someone's comparing themselves to other people's social media, you can choose whether you're going to look at social media. But we can't stop these things from happening in the world necessarily. We can just look at our own behaviors as well to see like how we can address the situation. And some of that is, I want to highlight that some of that sometimes is activism and things like that, where you can try to make an impact on things that are happening related to things like politics or war and other kinds of things. And that's really important as well for people if you feel passionate. But it's also interesting because that activism is a very, intentional behavior. So it's instead of kind of, being at home, for example, feeling very frustrated and unhappy about something that's happening in the world, that's a way that you can actually engage in a specific behavior to go do something about it. And sometimes that can help people feel better, even if you're feeling a lot of negative emotions about the situation. It's doing something in your control, choosing to do a behavior that can be really helpful for folks. Anyone else want to share, what they put up here in terms of things that lead them to feel unhappy, or any other reactions as well to what folks see about what other people have listed here? Yeah, feel free to get closer too if you guys need to see. I know it's a little hard to see.
Negativity, Noah.
Yeah, what are your
just
thoughts
seems
on
like
that?
everywhere you turn now, everybody has just learned to be negative against anything they come across. You used to be able to smile at a person and they would smile back, or open a door and you would get a thank you. Now it's, very negative. Nobody wants to have anything to do with anybody because they're just negative.
Yeah, it's interesting. So you're having experiences where you're noticing a difference in how people are interacting with each other and feeling that way. And it's interesting because I'm going to write this out to come back to it, that nobody wants to be kind to each other, because that's an interesting one, and that's a thought, that you have, a valid thought from your experiences. And I think it's an interesting thing because we can't change the behaviors of other people. But if we're feeling unhappy about experiencing people not being kind, that is something that we have control over in terms of our thoughts. So we'll get to that in a second. Bright Bunny.
Yeah, it's just what Ella said. Sometimes people come across rude, but you don't know what their situation is either. So I think in that situation, I wouldn't judge someone for it, because I don't know what their situation is. So, I mean, if I smile at someone and they don't smile back, then, maybe they're just having a bad day or something really bad's happened to them. So,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
Go ahead.
It's just, I don't think the world's full of sort of horrible, negative people. I just think it's just sometimes the way that we can perceive certain things, and we don't sort of take the time to think about what that other person might be going through. It might
Yep,
not be a
that's a
case of them being rude at all. It's just a case of them just maybe even being like us.
Yeah, it's really interesting what you're saying, and I think it's interesting because I mean, there's different situations that people can be in. There can be, we see videos going viral of people in public situations acting really negatively towards each other on TikTok and Instagram, but we don't see like when someone holds the door for someone or is really nice, like that's not going to get views and likes and drive the algorithm and engagement. Like, I mean, there are some heartfelt, videos and stuff like that, but there's like a selection bias, and that comes, and Mystic, we'll get to you in a second. I just want to mention that comes to these distortions that can happen in terms of our interpretation of what we're seeing in the world that leads us to feel unhappy, which, by the way, if someone has a cognitive distortion about the world around them and is feeling unhappy and they're misinterpreting potentially other people being unhappy, then they might be less happy. And then they might be less likely to smile back at someone, Ella, like you were talking about. And it can kind of be this contagion that happens of negative emotion where people are kind of building on top of each other and reinforcing their perceptions of the world and kind of making their perceptions come true, which there's a theme of kind of like self-fulfilling prophecies across different psychopathology in terms of mental health issues that people have. There's like, if someone's anxious about something, sometimes they engage in behaviors that lead that thing to be more likely to happen, or someone's depressed, struggling with depression, and they're laying in bed, but laying in bed makes you feel more sad and less motivated. So there's lots of self-fulfilling prophecies, and it's interesting that what you're keying in on is definitely one. So, we have in Cognitive Behavioral Immersion, we have classes on this, distortions of thinking. And it's interesting because overgeneralizing is one. Because Ella, for example, and I hope it's okay that I'm asking you this, as well. But like, it's interesting because you said, and I know that you probably didn't mean like nobody is kind to each other. I bet you could think of at least one person who's been kind. But it's interesting how our brains, with these automatic thoughts that come to mind, which affects our feelings of unhappiness, our brains go to these thoughts like nobody's kind to each other, or I think General Star, you also had a kind of generalization about nobody can talk about, what nobody can have different views, for example, and things like that. And so it's interesting because we can't control whether someone else smiles at us or whether someone engages with us about difference in the views that they have, but we can recognize our own automatic thoughts that might be happening about the situation and say, okay, wait, am I generalizing? Like, can I think of anyone who has been kind? What's the evidence that it's true or not? And that's a way that we can feel happier, because we can't control the people around us, but we can look at our own thoughts, or we can change our behaviors by setting boundaries to feel happier. And that's kind of the theme of this whole session, is that the idea is like, why does the world make us so unhappy? The reality is that the world doesn't make us unhappy. It's our reaction to the world that leads us to be unhappy. And how we react to the world, how we think, what our behaviors are, our physiology. Are we maladaptive coping through drinking alcohol or having substances, or are we going to a psychiatrist and getting a prescription for an antidepressant medication, or helping ourselves through exercising or meditation? How we respond to the world is ultimately what affects our emotions of unhappiness, and it's not actually the world around us that makes us feel unhappy. So the title was a little bit of a what are the clickbait kind of thing, because the reality is that the world doesn't make us unhappy. It's ourselves and our thoughts and our behaviors that ultimately lead us to be unhappy. And that's good news, because we can't change the world, but we can look inward and look at our own thoughts and behaviors, and sometimes affect our environment as well, which is different than the whole world. So thank you, Bright Bunny and Ella, for that, for bringing this up. And I wanted to share some of those distortions. Mystic.
Yeah, as I see it, our world right now, because we have so much exposure to social media, and we're understanding a lot more that's going on. Being human that we are, we have a tendency to, I picture it kind of metaphorically like a hurricane, And when we see what's going on inside that hurricane and we're triggered, and then so we add to that hurricane and it seems to be getting bigger and bigger. And so that self-awareness of understanding what is making you feel negatively, recognizing it, and then stepping back in the different ways that these tools give us is really, really important.
Yeah, yeah, I appreciate that. And that's, you know, we want that to go viral. Like we can be in Innerworld and the people watching on YouTube and, folks, like we can be the ones who come together, who overcome the fact that we might have different political views and come together and realize that we're all navigating anxiety or depression or things like that. Like we can build that movement, which I think Innerworld, that's what Innerworld is doing, and make the tools accessible to folks so that, and also you guys can bring these tools out to people. I mean, I don't know how many people here have shared a tool that they learned in Innerworld with someone else? If you guys use the thumbs up emoji, I'm just curious how many people have shared a tool with someone else. I know my husband is so sick of hearing. He uses the tools on me now. He's like, "Oh, that's a cognitive distortion." And I'm like, "Oh, you're right." So, but the cool thing is that they work. Even if you know how they work, you can still use them on yourself and other people. And yeah, so I think the tools are really the tools of cognitive behavioral immersion are very, very powerful for affecting those around us and making an impact. Insomnia Doodles.
Yeah, I've got the live chat for YouTube up, just out of curiosity.
Oh yeah, sure.
Somebody made a really good point that I thought that hadn't really been shared. It's kind of been hinted at, like kind of alluded to, and referring to social media. But Spartan on YouTube says people being so far into technology that they're forgetting the human race. Communication is lost from this. So just forgetting the humanity in one another. But I think they're alluding to the anonymity that we get online. It's so easy to be cruel to somebody and not see the actual fallout of your actions. And I think that it does tend to make people a lot more cynical and cruel. I think that's a good point. And also numb to humanity, like they had said.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I think and thank you for sharing that comment as well. I'll try to keep an eye on the YouTube comments. I think that what's interesting about that point about the idea that people online can be very mean to each other and we take out the humanity. I think there's a key difference between what we call synchronous social interactions and asynchronous social interactions. So asynchronous social interaction is any time that you have the ability to present yourself and choose what, text, typing out text or making a TikTok video or YouTube video, presenting yourself. And I think we even have, comparing myself to people's social media highlight reels is one of the things that leads, some of us to feel unhappy. And so that's asynchronous. And especially text, when people can write a long comment and, and attack each other. But it's interesting because once you're in a synchronous social interaction, even anonymous, with the right moderation, as Innerworld has, it's interesting because then the humanity is brought back into it. You have voice and tone and connection, and you can see someone's reactions with emoji or things like that. And so that really makes a huge difference because that combines technology with social interaction in a positive and healthy way, and with the right, community guidelines and boundaries as well. So I appreciate your sharing that. I think it's a very prescient point, Spartan, that you made on the YouTube comment. And so I also wanted to talk about an additional tool because sometimes there are things that are happening, like I see war here, or sometimes there's politics and elections and things like that we don't specifically have control over. Now, again, there are behaviors that one can engage in to try to affect these things, from campaigning or sharing things, canvassing, protesting, donating money, things like that, supporting your local community organization. So there are behaviors that you can engage in, but I think this, there is this, even if one's doing those behaviors, there's still negative feelings about things that are happening in the world that are outside of our control. And so we have a really good tool. This was actually a community suggested tool that was developed. And this comes from acceptance commitment therapy, but we've incorporated it into our cognitive behavioral immersion. And what's really great about this tool, and Leron, feel free to, for the folks on YouTube, to kind of zoom in on this if it's helpful. This tool is really, really powerful. It's called the hula hoop tool, and some people might have seen it. And the idea is that what's inside the hula hoop are things that you can control, and what's outside the hula hoop are things that we can't control. So inside the hula hoop, we have like our body, our thoughts, our actions, so thoughts, feelings, behaviors, and physiology, which is from the model, reactions, opinions, values, dreams, and wishes, things like that. We can contemplate and look at and change and modify. But things outside of our control, maybe things like other people's reactions, inevitable losses, the weather, other people's thoughts, things that we can't directly control. War is another one, or general things like poverty and lack of access to healthcare medicine. We can try to influence these things through our behaviors, through advocacy and voting and protests and things like that. But ultimately, we can't control those things. The only thing that we can control is internal. And that's a really important theme for when the world is leading us to feel unhappy, because we have to look inward to see, what are the things that we can and can't control. So I'm curious if anyone has any other kind of thoughts about, specific things that they've come to realize that they can't control. Maybe an example. Has anyone, used this tool before in Innerworld to identify something that they couldn't control and actually be able to, it helped them feel better about it, even though they couldn't change the situation? I'm kind of curious if anyone's had that experience of acceptance. Gentle Star?
Thank you. Not exactly, but one of the things that I do tell people when they're having troubles is to separate what is happening to you to what is happening around you.
Interesting. And can you go into a little more detail about, what you mean by that difference?
Well, usually it's people, friends, coworkers, they're upset about something that's going on in their family, and they're really oh, thank you very much. Love the coffee. They're upset about it, and I've got to remind them that it's not happening to them. It's okay to be concerned, but don't get yourself buried into somebody else's problem, because it is outside of your control. Very similar to the hula hoop.
Yeah. It's a really powerful idea. Because it's something that can lead people to realize that they can't control the situation, that they need to adapt and look inward. Any other thoughts on situations that folks have had kind of, before, where they're, have realized that they can't control, or something people are struggling with now? It could be something you shared here, or something people are thinking about that's on their mind, that's leading them in the world to feel unhappy, that they realize, that they can't control. I'm kind of curious, if anyone wants to share. Yeah, Faye?
Yes, I know when I first came to Innerworld, I had a lot of the distortions, and fortune telling and mind reading were very, very big on the list. So I was always overgeneralizing everything and thinking everybody thought bad about me. But when I stopped and started using the hula hoop, it was like I can deal with what I can think of and how I react to it, and it would lead me into the stop tool. So I always used it in combination, but just seeing it described really helped me focus on the internal items and just let me breathe and focus. So I stopped thinking about what everybody at work thought about me and focused more on my outcomes.
That's really beautiful. And how did that affect your feelings?
I didn't feel so self-negative all the time. I found I wasn't questioning myself as much. I wasn't going back and correcting or, looking through everything to see how, just to correct it. I was actually proud of what I did.
And that's beautiful. Yeah, and that's like a beautiful example of the world around you. One could interpret that before you learned about cognitive distortions and what you can and can't control. One could say, oh, the world, my workplace is making me so unhappy, and the world's making me so unhappy. But then when we look at our own thoughts and look at our own, boundaries of what we can and can't control, and realize that our behaviors and our thoughts are, the only things that we can, it can change your world, literally. It can literally change someone's world. And, I do want to recognize and identify that this is not, for people in situations where they're experiencing trauma or violence or other kinds of things, it's not always possible that it's this, that you can look at your, examine your beliefs or change your behaviors. Not everybody has those resources to be able to do that. So there are situations where it is, a very difficult situation to be able to do. And those are situations where, we need to think as humanity, like how can we help other people? And how can we contribute to, in whatever way, whether you're thinking about people who are in poverty or lack of access or other kinds of things. If you feel strongly about helping, a group of people, what behaviors can we engage in to help those individuals who don't have the resources? So yeah, I really appreciate your sharing that. Yeah, any other kind of examples or thoughts that come to mind of situations where people have maybe realized a cognitive distortion that's leading them about the world around them that they've kind of been able to identify? Or acceptance-based thoughts. Yeah, Bright Bunny?
Yeah, I've sort of been going through this since I was 19, depression, agoraphobia. Last couple of years have been really bad with panic attacks, which I realised I was actually doing it to myself, which was the worst part about it. Like one little argument or one little conversation that I'd had with somebody, I'd be sort of fretting for weeks over whether I'd said the wrong thing or, whether that person had taken it the wrong way or all of that stuff. And then I'd get myself in such a state and it was like a washing machine. But then I realised that I can't change who I am. And I can't worry about stuff like that because it will drive you mad in you. So I definitely have sort of got myself out of that spiral, I think.
That's really fantastic to hear. And have you kind of been able to use any of the tools of cognitive behavioral immersion in Innerworld to put that?
Yeah, I mean, the meetings that I've been going to have been brilliant and you learn so much from them that, they really help you, give you the tools to sort of go out and start your day and start it off in a good way. So that's helped an awful lot.
Yeah, that's really beautiful to hear. And it's interesting because I'm hearing a theme as well of people who care so much, having so much caring about and some anxiety about what other people are thinking. And so kind of releasing that and accepting that we can't control what other people are thinking. And maybe sometimes identifying the cognitive distortions. Mind reading is what Faye mentioned in terms of, do I know what this person is thinking or not? Could there be other explanations for the event? We have as well these reframe questions that are really powerful for the same kind of thing. And, the idea there is to be able to look at our thoughts and see whether or not they're true or accurate. These reframe questions of like, what would I tell a friend who's in the same kind of situation? Or are there alternative ways to view the event, the situation? The reframe questions is another really powerful tool that we have in the world of CBI to be able to address those things. I know we only have about 10 minutes left, and so I also wanted to bring up some additional tools on emotion regulation, because those emotion regulation is another method we use. Hold on, my menu is stuck. There we go. Okay, I got my pointer back. So, one thing I want to mention is we have these coping skills. That's a beautiful kind of tool. I'm going to expand a little bit if you guys don't mind moving just a slightly. Mystic, I'm putting this to your right. I know it's hard to see a little bit on flat screen. There we go. Okay. So we have these different kinds of coping skills. And a lot of this, again, are behaviors or thoughts that we can engage in of like self-soothing, trying to ground ourselves in situations where we're feeling upset and distressed. We have things like opposite action, doing the opposite of your impulse and things like that. You know, forming a crisis plan if you are getting to the point of being in crisis. Since we don't cover crisis intervention in Innerworld or mindfulness, acceptance, kind of trying to meditate or relax and kind of ground and focus on your body and your breathing and things like that in order to help yourself feel less anxious. These are all kind of coping skills that are possible to use. Has anyone, you know, tried one of these coping skills and found them particularly effective?
I know that mindfulness and in particular practicing gratitude has been really helpful for me.
Interesting. In what way?
Well, I did a long-term mindfulness practice. I took a college course on Coursera. I think it was the Science of Happiness or something like that. They challenged you to do a mindfulness practice where you had to meditate for a certain amount of time every day, and the focus of the meditation was actually on gratitude. So when you're sitting there, you're focusing on your breath, and then you think about something that you're grateful for, and then you savor certain moments throughout the day as well. And that whole practice just made it a lot easier for me to put things into perspective and remind myself that there are a lot of really good things in the world despite the bad stuff.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great example. And that's also why we started out with thinking about things that lead us to feel happy in the world as well. I think I saw another hand. Who, does someone else have their hand up? Faye, I think.
I was just gonna, I carry a worry stone in my pocket, and it really helps to keep me grounded and channel my thoughts.
And what is a worry stone?
It's just a stone, and it's very small, but it has a thumb indentation, so you can just rub your thumb on it, have it in your hand.
I like that a lot. Yeah, Mystic.
It's funny that they said that because I was going to bring that up, but I didn't want to take anything away from the main idea you were talking about. But after I help everybody look at their triggers, I have them hold on to, I use personally Tiger's Eye, and we start going over all sorts of things that are absolutely wonderful and things that makes them happy, like their favorite gift or their favorite vacation. And we think about those things while they're using the worry stone, so to speak. And so whenever they felt those triggers that they are starting to recognize, they would just go in their pocket and pull out their worry stone.
Yeah, I like that idea a lot. Sometimes I use, I don't know if anyone here uses Silly Putty, but that's something if I'm feeling very stressed that is very helpful, or something, you know, distracting and things like that. It's another example of sensory. All these different things are kind of sensory things that are really, really helpful, and they're adaptive things because there's maladaptive sensory inputs. Sometimes that can be what things like cutting or picking or pulling hair, those kinds of things are examples, just like the worry stone or silly putty or other kinds of things, but more maladaptive because they can be damaging to the body. So finding these external things to help us regulate emotion, I think, is really, really a fantastic resource. Thank you, Mystic, for sharing that.
Sure.
Bright Bunny.
One of the things that when it comes to the list of coping skills, what I've always recommended, and I do myself, is you take these regular coping skills, and everybody has their own things that makes them feel good or feels better or redirects them. And so I take a list of paper, and every time I think of something I like or I enjoy, I write it on that paper, and I can tell you I've got about 3 or 4 pages of coping skills.
Wow, that's beautiful. I love that, Mystic. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, Bright Bunny.
Yeah, I've got a couple. I do the distraction. I just find that even if I just go for a little walk, at least getting me out, different sounds, you know, different environment helps. I've got like a crisis plan in place that if I feel myself slipping, I know that I'm not going to be looking after myself. So I make sure that I've got sort of little bags of, you know, wipes and stuff that I can, you know, just if I don't feel like, you know, because you don't always feel like getting in the shower if you feel like absolute rubbish. So I've got sort of all that. Emotional awareness. Yeah, I try and make sure that I'm emotionally aware of not only myself but other people, which sometimes isn't a benefit, but it helps, and self-soothing. And I am totally addicted to slime.
Hey, that's like silly putty a little bit.
Yep,
That's great.
completely
Well,
addicted to slime.
thank you for sharing, Bright Bunny. Sounds like you're using a lot of coping skills, which is really fantastic. And that's the other thing, you can have a diversity of skills that are available. Um, so we have Sadie Mae and Peppermint Tea, and then we can wrap up with some takeaways as well. So Sadie Mae, do you want to go next? Oh, hold on. Let me just, I think you're muted. Hold on 1 second. Okay. Now you should be, okay, there we go.
I rely a lot on my faith. I pray. I didn't hear anyone else say that, but I do pray. Um, I use distractions. I I picked up diamond printing, diamond painting, and that helps a lot because it directs my mind to something else. I like to do puzzles that'll distract me. Also, I do opposite action. If I'm feeling down or I feel stressed, I try to do the opposite. I'll go outside, sit in the sun, walk. I have a puppy, play with the dog. I'll do the opposite instead of going into my feelings, crying and, you know, acting out. I just do the opposite. I do emotional awareness. I talk to myself. I know when I'm in that mood and I talk to myself. And I make positive affirmations. I tell myself that I'm good, that I did my best, that I can do. So I talk to myself. To me, that's emotional awareness, being aware of your mind state. Um, and I also picked up journaling. I used to always say, why would people journal? What can you write about? But I've been journaling lately, and that helps, especially when I'm really low. And I can go back later and read on it and improve on it each time. So basically, that's what I do.
Thank you for sharing, Sadie Mae. It sounds like you have a lot of different resources, and faith was a great example as well for a lot of people. Spirituality, and faith can be a really helpful guiding force for people. So I really appreciate your sharing that as well. And yeah, so we just have time. Peppermint tea, and then last hand, and then we can wrap up. So, and thank you everyone for your thoughts. Yeah, peppermint tea.
Okay, I'm gonna wrap mine up quick. I also have faith, but what I usually do for self-soothing, and this can be for like anxiety or a lot of times for me in the past, it was anger. Definitely taste. Anything pepperminty, peppermint chocolate, fave Girl Scout Thin Mints, that totally works. As soon as I get that mint hit, I'm good to go. And listening to music. So when I had a lot of anxiety trying to book cookie booths at 6 o'clock in the morning, I'd have to play the Thunderstruck song from AC/DC to get me all riled up to get those booths as quick as I can. And then, yay, it's done. And I just didn't have anxiety.
Amazing. I love
Thank you for
that.
letting me
I really
share.
appreciate you sharing these. Yeah, yeah, I think these are great. And I love hearing people's different ones. I think that's really powerful and beautiful. Um, okay, Ella, last hand. Do you want to share?
I was just gonna about the same thing as Sadie Mae was saying about journaling. I journal and then I start chunking through my journal and I get down to what is the problem, and hopefully, I may not find a solution, but I'll understand why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling by doing the chunking. And it may take 10 minutes of chunking and it may take 2 days of chunking, but I'll finally get down to the real problem that I'm feeling the way that I'm feeling.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I think that's really powerful to reflect, and that's a great time to use some of these tools as well that we have in the world to contemplate and handle the things that are going on that you're noticing in your journal. So yeah, well, I just want to wrap up this event on why today's world can make you feel so unhappy. And really the theme again of this is that the world doesn't always make us feel anything. It's really our reaction to the world around us, our thoughts, our feelings, behaviors, our physiology, how we can affect our immediate environment. Those are things that we have under our control. And so we have different tools here, including the hula hoop of thinking what's inside or outside of our control, reframe questions when we're looking at our thoughts, distortions that we can list out, and of course, Innerworld that you can come to for support to learn how to use these tools of cognitive behavioral immersion and things. So, I think ultimately there are tools, even in a situation where we can't control our environment and what's happening, we can look inward and look at our thoughts and figure out, how can we examine our beliefs or change our behaviors or learn to practice acceptance and mindfulness. So I really appreciate everybody being here and participating. Yeah, and thank you everyone as well watching on the stream. And we look forward to doing one of these again soon. So thank you, everyone.
Really appreciate you having it.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank
you. Thanks,
That's great.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
You too. Good to see you, Noah.